What if I told you that there was a time when everyone in Zimbabwe was a multi-billionaire? People literally had so much cash they needed wheelbarrows to carry it around. Before you get too excited, there's something else you need to know. 1 billion Zimbabwean dollars was just barely enough to buy a bag of coffee beans. So being a billionaire was worthless, it meant nothing. Today, inflation is affecting people all over the world, and everyone's talking about it. But have you heard of hyperinflation? Welcome to Zimbabwe between 2007 and 2009. The country was plagued by catastrophic hyperinflation to the point that Zimbabwe's government was forced to issue a 100 trillion Zimbabwean dollar bill, turning the nation's economy into a historic example of financial collapse. Hyperinflation occurs when prices rise by at least 50% in 1 month or 1,000% per year. These massive price changes happen quickly, making common items unaffordable. Hyperinflation is a rare economic phenomenon, and the US has never experienced it. But just because it hasn't happened in the past, doesn't mean it can never happen in the future. In this video, I'll give you 11 tips to prepare yourself from hyperinflation, and trust me when I say that tips number 8 and 11 could quite literally save your life and the lives of your family. Just to be clear, these tips are not mine, and they don't come from any economics manual. They are extremely practical pieces of advice from the people of Zimbabwe, who survived one of the most brutal cases of hyperinflation the world has ever seen. Now before I get started, if you want to protect yourself from extreme situations like hyperinflation, one of the best things you can do is diversify your investments across many different sectors and companies. The hard part for most people is identifying these opportunities in the market. The trick is to ignore hype around companies like Nvidia and focus on low-key companies with strong fundamentals and low prices. I recently started using Insider Newsletter. Out of hundreds of stock-picking services, Insider Newsletter consistently gives the best returns. And for a limited time, you can try it for just $1 using the link in the description below. Number 1, escape while you can. Imagine you are on a ship in the early 1900s and the ship's name is Titanic. You already know you're in trouble, right? Okay, now answer this. Which part of the ship is safe and will allow you to survive the crash? The obvious answer is none. No part of the ship is safe because the whole thing is about to go under. It's just a matter of time before even the tip of the ship sinks below the surface. The best way to survive is to get off the ship as fast as possible. The same concept applies to your money during hyperinflation. Think about it. If money itself loses all value, what possible investment, stock, or bond can help you? Can your rental real estate plow the land and put food on the table for you? No, all it can do is generate more worthless cash. Actually, it might not even do that, because no one will be able to afford rent that increases every day. The best way to survive hyperinflation is to avoid it altogether, which is exactly what about 4 million Zimbabweans did during their crisis, and they were rewarded for it instantly. It wasn't easy, and it can't be recommended to everyone, especially people with families and young children, but based on the responses of Zimbabwean citizens who were interviewed by the author, it is certainly an important consideration if hyperinflation becomes a serious risk in your country. While most of these immigrants faced a lot of financial struggle after fleeing the nation, many Zimbabwean citizens have emphasized that this is nothing compared to the difficulties they would have faced if they didn't leave. In extreme cases, the government can even prevent people from leaving the country and monitor and limit movements at the borders. Fortunately, the Zimbabwean government was not in a position to be able to do this, as it requires advanced planning and a large budget in itself, but if they could have, they probably would have. But what about you? What would you do in such a situation? Do you have an escape plan? Have you ever thought about obtaining a second or third passport so you can move to another country if your government fails? Number 2, relationships and communities. In the midst of Zimbabwe's hyperinflation crisis, the real currency became trust and community ties. As money lost its value, Zimbabweans discovered that survival hinged on forming strong, interdependent relationships. Lone wolves struggled, but those who joined forces with neighbors, sports clubs, churches, and charities found a lifeline. These groups transformed into successful hubs for bartering and support, offering not just essentials but also protection. In such times, your wealth isn't measured in dollars but in the strength of your connections and the trust you've built within your community. Number 3, hold foreign currencies offshore. When money loses its value, you need a backup plan. Governments can restrict you to only use their own currency during hyperinflation, especially when they're printing a lot of it. This can be a problem. You might think about putting some money in different countries or in assets that store their value, but here's the thing. Even global currencies like the US dollar are being printed in large quantities, so they're not as safe as they used to be. I recently read about a guy named Michael Saylor, a billionaire who lost over $900,000 in Argentina. He had millions in a bank there, and then the government said all foreign money had to be exchanged into local currency. After that, the local money became much less valuable compared to the dollar. He lost about 90% of his money. $1 million quickly dwindled down to being worth only $100,000. This shows that keeping foreign money in your country can be risky. It's usually better to store the currency in a different country that you can travel to. However, choosing which foreign currency to invest in is hard. Even the US dollar and euro are getting weaker. That's why I like to keep small amounts of gold and silver in a vault, which I personally store in a locker, and also in foreign countries inside a safety deposit box. But you can't always trust other people's advice when it comes to investing. I made a video leaking Warren Buffett's true thoughts on gold. Let's just say he's not a fan and he doesn't think highly of people who invest in gold. Watch that after this video. The link is in the description. Number 4. Cash. During hyperinflation, think about taking your money out of the bank as fast as possible. Once you have your cash, you need to convert cash into stuff that keeps its value, and you can trade later, like foreign money, gold and silver coins, fuel, or canned food that lasts a long time. Banks can get very sneaky during these times. They might try to seduce you by offering high interest rates if you give them your cash, making it look like your money is growing, but it's just an illusion. The true value of money is in its purchasing power, not a number on a screen or a paper bill. $1 billion isn't worth much if all it can buy is a bag of coffee beans. In Zimbabwe, for example, bank interest rates went up to 8,000%. It sounded great because people thought they could grow their money 80 times in a year. But it wasn't enough. A lot of folks didn't really get what was going on. They saw these big interest rates and put their savings in the bank, but in the end, they lost it all. So, if you're in a similar situation, be careful with your money. Don't just leave it in the bank thinking it'll grow. Take it out and start buying valuable things with it as fast as possible. Every day that you wait will result in your cash losing more value. Number 5. Unit of account. Imagine going to a gas station every day to buy a liter of gasoline. You pay, let's say, $1, and you get exactly 1 liter. But one day, you pay the same $1, and the pump only gives you 0.9 liters. When you ask why, the attendant says that from now on, a liter is only 0.9 liters. The next day, it's 0.8 liters for the same price. The amount you get for a liter keeps shrinking. You'd feel cheated, right? Because standard measurements like liters or meters should always stay the same. It's like trying to cook a recipe when the size of a cup or a spoon keeps changing. Just like these measurements, money is a tool for measuring value in economics called a unit of account. For the economy to function properly, this unit needs to be stable. But during hyperinflation, money loses this stability. It's like the gasoline example, where the quantity you get for your money keeps changing over short intervals of time. In such situations, businesses and people need to find something else that's stable to measure value, like how people in Zimbabwe used the US dollar and food as units of account instead of their constantly changing currency. Number 6. Debt. During hyperinflation, the last thing anyone wants to do is lend someone money. If you owe someone money during this time, it becomes super easy to pay them back. But for the person who lent the money, it's bad news. They get paid back with money that's worth a lot less than when they lent it. Even if they charge interest, it usually doesn't keep up with the crazy inflation rates. Here's an example. Imagine you lend someone $100 when a loaf of bread costs $1, then hyperinflation hits, and by the time they pay you back, a loaf of bread costs $100. You get your $100 back, but now you can only buy 1 loaf instead of 100 loaves. You've lost a lot of value. If you're thinking of borrowing from people you know, like friends or family, during hyperinflation, it's tricky. Is it fair to borrow knowing they'll get paid back with money that's worth much less? It doesn't really seem like a fair deal. If you have to borrow or lend money when there's crazy inflation, it's better to use something that keeps its value, like stable foreign currencies, gold, or even things like fuel or food. That way, if you're borrowing, you know you won't be hurting the person lending you the money. In Zimbabwe, people often use things like fuel or foreign currency for this reason. It keeps things fair for everyone involved. Number 7. Manage assets, not income. Running a business in a country with high inflation is no joke. You face rising costs, government restrictions on foreign currency, trouble paying your team, failing public services, and fewer customers because people are poor or are leaving the country. In this tough situation, businesses need to change how they operate. Instead of focusing on selling products and services to customers, they need to focus on survival. One strategic way to do this is to start investing money in physical assets that keep their value and can be traded, like real estate, food, or gas. And if you want ideas for which companies to invest in, check Insider Newsletter. They regularly find amazing food and gas companies that are undervalued and have strong potential for growth, and they share all their research with you every week in their newsletter. I use it myself, and for AA limited time, you can try it for just $1 using the link in the description. Number 8, pensions. During hyperinflation, your pension savings will be completely worthless. A financial expert from Zimbabwe once said that if he could go back in time, he would tell people to take their pension money out and put it into something valuable. If you leave it in normal savings like cash or bonds, it'll become worthless. This means you have to think differently about saving money and abandon all the commonly taught Western financial principles like hoarding cash or buying bonds. Instead, you should turn your savings into assets that keep their value or things you'll need to live, such as food and clothing. This is because neither government nor private pensions can protect you in times of hyperinflation. It's all about finding safe ways to keep the value of your savings. Hyperinflation can truly become an everyman for themselves situation. Number 9. Medium of exchange. One of the fundamental uses of money is to serve as a medium of exchange. But what if you aren't permitted to use your regular currency? Some of you might already use some of the high-tech platforms that let you trade using gold. But if the government controls the internet and payment processors that power these platforms, you're not any better off than everyone else. Plus, staying safe online is another thing to worry about with these platforms. According to the author, cryptocurrencies like Bitcoin could be a good solution. While it's become a common theme in the personal finance space on YouTube to bash on crypto due to the recent FTX scandal as well as the rampant crypto scams, we have to be careful so we don't throw the baby out with the bathwater. The fundamental value of cryptocurrency is to protect us from exactly these types of extreme situations. Popular currencies like Bitcoin are actually extremely secure, keep your details private, and are easy to use. They also aren't operated by any government and use sophisticated technology that limits the supply of these coins. Unlike paper currency, which the government can literally print billions of anytime they want. These technologies are evolving rapidly, and it's important to stay informed about the latest advances and innovations regarding electronic currencies. I would recommend having a small percentage of your investments in crypto, but only invest what you can afford to completely lose, because cryptocurrencies are still very volatile. Personally, I plan to keep at least 5% of my investable assets in Bitcoin and Ethereum. To store the coins, I would recommend using a cold storage wallet like the Ledger Nano X, instead of a website like Coinbase, which requires you to use someone else's platform and is susceptible to fraud. Number 10. Save and invest. If you take all your money out of regular investments, you'll still need to figure out where else to put all that cash. This is a tough question, and even the book doesn't give a clear answer because it is highly dependent on many different factors. To be honest, I'm not entirely sure either. But one thing's for sure, not saving in real intrinsically valuable assets is a bad idea if hyperinflation hits. Intrinsically valued assets are things that are valuable on their own, without requiring a government telling you it's valuable. For example, food, water, and shelter will always be intrinsically valuable. During times of hyperinflation, people often turn to things like company stocks, gold and silver, property, unique collectible items, and strong foreign currency. When you decide where to put your money, think about a few things. Can this asset keep its value? Can you sell it easily if you really need to? How hard is it to move, keep safe, and look after? And how likely is it that the government can take it from you? The last, but also the most important piece of advice to be ready for inflation and hyperinflation is number 11. Learn to listen. Governments use confusing language and rhetoric as powerful tools of control. You should learn to understand the statements made by authorities, what they say, and especially what they don't say. In practice, most financial concepts are not too complicated for the average citizen to understand, despite what many governments and economists would like you to believe. A useful rule of thumb is this: if you don't understand what they're saying, it probably means they don't want you to understand. And it's time to take matters into your own hands and figure out a survival plan.